Diana had it all. Multiple businesses, lavish homes, money in the bank, marriage, kids, you name it. But then she went bankrupt. And then what followed was a summer of grief, where people, even her beloved cat, all passed away, leaving her in a state of grief. But then Diana rose like a phoenix from the ashes. Join me for her story. This is the highway to healing. Thank you so much for being a part of today's episode. I'm thrilled to be able to chat with you. You've listed a lot of different pivotal moments in your life that have really changed and shaped who you are and what you bring to the world. I would love for you to tell our listeners and our audience, what are some of those things that have happened to you that have shaped your life?
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to have this conversation with you and with your listeners. I have, very, very typical to probably a lot of listeners, grew up in a home where I was a good little girl who was seen and not heard. And yet my natural state was that of being very excitable, very authentic, very outgoing, very chatty. And very early on, I learned that my voice wasn't welcome. So I shut it down. And what I learned over the years is that when I shut down my voice, I shut down a big part of myself. I shut down my life force, and I shut down my anger, and I shut down my grief, and I shut down so much. And what I realized as I follow the breadcrumbs of my life is that there was a big part of me that lived in a cloak of shame, that there was something wrong with me. And I felt very misaligned with who I was and how I was showing up, because I wanted to give more to the world, but I wasn't really permitted to. So fast forward, I didn't let that stop me. And I kept moving forward. I had a vision for myself. I knew what I wanted to do. I went to graduate school. I got a master's degree, worked for 30 years as a speech language pathologist. And as I followed the breadcrumbs again, I realized I was helping kids, nonverbal kids, access their voice, find a voice system. And all of that was about helping me find my voice. And then I went in to become a yoga instructor, run a teacher training program, helped women particularly clear their throat chakras, and then eventually became a realignment coach where I help people to realign in their lives so they can access their voice. So that's sort of the big picture. The small pieces inside that really took me to a place of deepening my understanding of myself and my mission and my vision for my life, two were really pivotal. I mean, I had a lot of abuse and sexual abuse, physical abuse growing up, and worked through a lot of that over the years. But then in 2013, I had 4 businesses and was living what looked like a really comfortable life. Big house, some investment properties, nice cars, worked, around my kids' school schedules. And slowly, one by one, through choices that I went along with. So I take responsibility, because it's really easy to sit and blame when things go horrifically wrong in your life. But I really have learned that if I don't take responsibility for myself, I don't get to grow and I don't get to learn. So the responsibility that I took was to look at, where did I say yes when I really needed to say no? And I said a lot of yeses. And that led to eventually all of my businesses closing, losing my investment properties, my retirement income, my vehicles, my house, and bankruptcy. And that was a really dark time in my life where I had a really hard time getting out of bed. I allowed myself to be defined by the experience. I'm quotation marks, I know your listeners can't see, but quotation marks, friends really helped me to stay in that place of shame. I got a lot of how dare you, how could you, when I tried to rebuild myself to come out of that place. I tried to literally, I was trying to crawl out of that darkness, and I kept getting kicked back in. Now I realized I allowed myself to be there. I didn't have the strength to say, no, I can stand on my feet and I can do this, and I'm worthy and I'm meant to be here. So all of the cloaks of shame that I had been carrying, all of my inability to access my voice at that time, my inability to really touch my anger and be angry at the people who betrayed me, I shut all that down and let myself be defined by the experience. And that was a really, really dark time of my life. I came through that, and I started doing a lot of embodied work. And the embodied work is going into and exploring and excavating the shadows, which are the deep parts of ourselves that we were told were wrong and we don't want the world to see. And I started doing a lot of my personal development work became about connecting the dots in my life. And I eventually was able to come out of that dark place and did some amazing things and became a coach and helped a lot of other people. And then this past summer, I found myself in another really dark place, but this place was a place of grief. It wasn't a place of shame. It was deep, deep grief, and it was heartbreak. And there were many situations that led me to experience that and took me to my knees. And different from in 2013, where I felt myself having to claw my way out of that hole of shame. And there was a strong desire to move through it, to get through it, to overcome it. This experience this summer of grief was completely about fully surrendering into the grief. And the lessons that I've received from that have been unbelievable.
It sounds to me as I listen to this, and thank you for sharing that, that the bankruptcy, the loss of everything opened up one door of healing.
Yeah.
And then the summer of loss, as you described it, opened up another layer, like an onion, and peeling away those layers. You know, I often hear people say, gosh, I thought I learned that lesson. And then something else will come in, another wave that needs to be healed or cleared. You mentioned that during some of these dark moments, you know, having trouble even getting out of bed. And I know a lot of people listening have had those, what we might call dark nights of the soul. How did you get yourself out of bed?
I was really grateful that I had 2 kids. And so I had that purpose to get me up. And I wasn't super productive. I wasn't super creative. I was really managing, and I'll say managing depression. And I managed it holistically because I had that purpose to get up in the morning and feed my kids. But I didn't know how I was going to get a cup of milk on the table. We used to still drink milk those days. I didn't know how I was going to drive my daughter to school. I had to make a decision between, do I drive her to school or do I try to go to work? Because I was back at work in my old job because I only had gas to do one. I had to make a choice. So times were really tough. My kids were really inspiring for me. Their smiles, their laughter, I really hid a lot from them. And that was really inspirational. The other thing is, I have a really strong belief, and I teach this. I really believe that the universe has my back. And when I say the universe, it's the God of your understanding. And if that doesn't even resonate, then say love has my back and always has. And I've had experiences in my life, in the most unexpected times of my life, where I was reminded of that. And at the time, I didn't know why this was happening. So it wasn't the time to say everything happens for a reason, because to that I'll call bull. Like, don't tell me that in the middle of my grief, in the middle of my depth. I know that to be true, but it's not the time to say it. There's meaning that comes at the right time when we're ready to receive it. But I had enough knowledge to know there was something happening here that eventually would lead to the evolution of my soul. And I trusted in that. And so trust and faith were 2 critical pieces. And when because I stepped away from a lot of my practices for a while, I stepped away from meditation, I stepped away from prayer, I stepped away from yoga, the things that really brought me a grounded, faith-based, grace-filled life. I stepped away from that for probably a couple of months. And then eventually it's like, yeah, the sun is still rising. I'm not, but the sun is. Life is going on. The world is going on. Okay, I too will get up today. And so I had these practices that are these beliefs that kept me going, and then eventually moved back into my daily practice of self-care, which is meditation, breath work, nature walks every single day. I still do all of those today, journaling, and a strong belief that any of those situations, I know in the middle of it, and for anyone listening, I don't want to ever minimize what you're going through. When we look back, we see how that was a moment in time in our lives and that we will get through it. So that strong belief that I will get through this most of the time kept me going. Not always. There were times where I just needed to be in the dark. But there's value in the dark. There's growth in the dark. There's lessons in the dark. We just can't stay in the dark for too long.
Why do you feel like these specific lessons stepped forward for you in this lifetime? What were you meant to learn from all of these different things?
I think that we're all meant to learn how to walk ourselves home to the love and the goodness in our hearts. And sometimes when we need to learn that the most, we have the most difficult lessons. I was living up until the age of about 32, very unconscious, and that like life looked kind of good, but it was easy, but I wasn't connected. I didn't feel on purpose. I didn't feel super inspired. And I certainly wasn't living from a heart-centered place. In fact, I was given a title of being the Ice Queen because I had learned to protect my heart so much. And so these experiences come to me, I'll speak for myself, came to me to awaken me to remember that there's something bigger and a bigger reason that I'm here. And I don't know that I can even tell you what that is, except I know I'm here to serve. And in order for me to serve, I needed to have my heart broken fully open. And the Ice Queen didn't help that. The Ice Queen didn't allow me to be in service and on purpose in my life. So I believe that that was my reason. This summer, when I landed in a place of complete collapse grief, I had a very different experience to my relationship to my pain than I did 8 years ago when I went through the bankruptcy, 7, 8 years ago. At that time, I had a lot of resistance to what was going on. And I had a lot of resistance to the shame. And I had a lot of resistance to I had really no connection to the anger. I kind of pushed that down. Resistance to where I was. I felt like a victim. This summer, I landed in the place of grief, and it was very, very different because I've learned that everything has value if I allow it to, and I get to assign the meaning to my experience that I want to assign. And so in doing so, I didn't deny my experience. In fact, I actually moved towards it. Now, for anyone listening, this is a really hard thing to do. Instead of saying, I don't want to feel that pain, I'm going to go watch Netflix, I'm going to drink, I'm going to smoke, I'm going to do whatever. I actually literally opened the door to my pain and went into it. And I sat in it. And it was painful. And I cried for hours. And in doing so, I know that it wasn't just immediate grief. I knew it was old grief. And I learned a really valuable lesson. When I didn't deny the experiences, when I didn't turn away from them, when I went towards them, there was a moment, many moments, where I found myself witnessing my grief. In other words, I was in the grief, but I wasn't in the story of the grief. So I could feel it without making it bad, victim, wrong, needing to be different. I was in the grief without being in the story. And in that moment, and I had a teacher who had told me this, but I never fully felt it. I felt good feeling bad. And feeling good feeling bad is amazing because you're feeling. And here's a woman who came from being an ice queen to being able to feel fully. And then what I realized is on the other side of grief, because grief is a beautiful temple emotion. It's a water emotion. And on the other side of grief, when you can give space for it and move towards it and let it move through you, is yearning. And yearning is my deep longing for what I want to bring into the world. And it's amazing what doors have opened up since I've gone through that process just a couple of months ago. So when you say what is the purpose for going through this? The purpose is life.
Beautiful, beautiful. There are moments of your story that make me recognize the energy or feel that the energy of shame has been a part of your life experience. And I would even say it's been woven through some of those key points that you've had in your lifetime. Where do you feel, or how has shame shown up for you in life? And how did you finally heal that energy of shame? Because so many people deal with that low frequency, whether it's something that happened years ago or something that they just cannot process and release that happened the other day. Mm-hmm. So how does shame show up for you, and how did you heal that?
I remember the first time that my body felt shame. I was 6 years old, taking drinks out to a construction crew building a pool in my backyard. And they all started pointing and laughing, and I didn't understand. When I got back inside, I realized my bikini top had risen up. And so my little tiny 6-year-old breasts were exposed. And I remember that being the first day that I took on shame from my body, and I carried it for a very long time. And then shame really was a primary expression of emotional expression that I carried through most of my life. And I think that we as a society are really good at creating shame for other people and making sure they feel it. Brene Brown talks about shame says I am bad versus guilt is I did something bad. And other people like to reinforce that. They will tell us that we're bad. When the reality is, you mentioned shame is one of the lowest vibrational frequencies on earth. And I think the antidote to shame is to give it a voice, to talk about your stories. That's why I speak. That's why I write, to talk about the stories, to let you know that your stories don't define you. What happened in your life does not define who you are today unless you allow it to be. And in one of the stories that I wrote in a book called Ignite Female Changemakers, I have a power quote that says, our experiences do not define us. Our experiences refine us and have the potential to catapult us to our deepest purpose. There was a moment in my life where I realized I am not my story. Things have happened to me, but that's not who I am. And I no longer allow other people to define me. And people try. And so when we can get really clear with our boundaries, what is it that you're willing to take on? What is it that you're willing to accept for yourself? And where can you say, no, I don't take that on. That's not who I am. And then ultimately coming to a place of self-acceptance and self-love. And that's a journey when one is, I carried shame for a long time. And moving to self-acceptance and self-love, truly it happened when I started doing some deep shadow work, going deep inside me and say, where are those parts of me that I have never been allowed to show or feel? Anger was a big one. I was never angry. And so learning to touch my anger, to release it in a way that was appropriate and in the right environment. So I don't lash out at people, but I create opportunities to release it in a way that it can be received and held. It's through circle work that I host and that I participate in. That was a massive game changer for me. And I can remember the first time it happened, I was in Amsterdam and I was encouraged to touch my anger. And I saw people touch their anger and I thought, there's no way. I'm a good little girl. I don't touch anger. I have nothing to be angry about. So what if I was abused? So what if I lost 4 businesses because of other people's decisions that I went along with? So what if my friends betrayed me and started a public Facebook slaughter because they didn't think that I deserved to start working again? I pretended I had no anger. And then this one day when it was like the anger shadow day, I thought, okay, I'm going to try this out. And I started expressing my anger and it came out as rage, but I was in a circle that was safe. I don't want people to do this with their family because that's not necessarily going to, give you the right results. I was in a circle of people in a container that was safe and healthy. And when I expressed my anger and rage for about like 30 seconds, I looked around and I said a whole bunch of words that I'd never said before. But I looked around and people were actually receiving me and applauding me and celebrating me and saying they could feel me more because I was feeling myself more. When I started doing that, I realized that I could unplug a lot of that and unwind a lot of that tension and trauma that was being held as shame. I started to unzip it, unwind it, unpack it, release it. And truly, I don't carry any shame today. Not for my body, not for my experiences, not for my life. And I'm 55, so it's been a journey. My mission, my passion, my purpose in life is to help people get there sooner than age 55. And 55 is not too late either.
I completely agree. And thank you for sharing some of those moments that you had to heal from, right? Walk our audience through if they are going through something with rage or with shame. What is something that you can tell them that's a thing that they can do, a tip that they can activate in their life? Because we can't all go to a retreat or go, and especially with everything going on in the world the way that it is. So what can they do from home? What can they do today to help them get through some of this?
Yeah. So rage and anger, for example, and grief, they're very different frequencies. They're very different expressions in the body, but they're all held as tension. So if we think about, okay, I notice something, maybe I notice it, I label it as rage or suppressed rage or grief or shame. It's the body experiences it all as tension. And when we hold tension, we kink our nervous system shut, like we shut down our life force. So what we need to do is somehow figure out how can we very gently, very tenderly start to unwind the nervous system. So practices that I find really helpful, movement with breath. I call it yoga, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's ecstatic dance. Sometimes it's going out for walks and being really mindful. So those practices are really helpful for me. Journaling is really helpful. You can put on paper what you might never be safe enough to share with someone. You know, there's some things that maybe the other person cannot hold for you, and so it's not safe for you to express it to them. Find someone that you can say, you know what, I just need to let out. I need to go like just yell for 30 seconds or cry for like 2 hours. Can you just be with me? And the other person's not there to fix anything, because that comes with the presumption that you're broken and you need to be fixed. And I want to tell each and every one of you listening, you are not broken and you do not need to be fixed. You have tension that you've held in your body from a lifetime of trauma or drama that is longing to heal. So having someone to be able to, we call it holding the space, be with you without needing to fix you. And that's a beauty of a coach, for example. A therapist typically comes with the idea that they're going to fix. I don't want to put down therapists in any way, but it's not about fixing or changing. It's about giving you the opportunity to release the tension. Breath work is fantastic. Meditation is great, but I put a caution around meditation because meditation is very passive. And tension usually needs to move through the body. So it has to be some kind of movement. When I had my experiences this summer of crying for hours at a time, I have a very skillful, gifted, wise 23-year-old daughter who's done my teacher training program and has done some of the circle work with me. And when she knew I was crying, she would come downstairs and she wouldn't even say, "What's wrong, Mom?" or "Are you okay?" Because that wouldn't have helped me. What she did is she put her butt down on the floor next to me and sat there with me, not saying a thing. That's what it means to hold space. And that's what we need. I really feel like we need to do this healing together in the presence of another. And in the absence of that, go in a room and scream. Put on music and dance like crazy. Sing at the top of your lungs. The raunchiest music, the quietest music, the grief-filled music, whatever you need to release. Let that be your expression. Don't hold it in. We have the capacity to turn on the faucet and turn it off, but we need to channel it through conscious heart awareness. In other words, we're not just raging in an uncontrolled way, but we're actually putting on a music, intentionally releasing anger, feeling the anger in the body, doing movements, stomping the feet, whatever that needs to release it. If there's a conscious intention, there's an awakened awareness when it's being released. So it's not just unconsciously yelling at your partner, which is just going to damage your relationship. And hopefully people can understand the difference.
I appreciate you sharing that and giving the audience really applicable ways to release it from the body. Because you're right, I take a writing class, and after we write our words down, the teacher says, "Okay, now get up, move, yell, scream, and let it all out." And that's right in alignment with what you just shared. So thank you for that. So obviously we've talked about your life and pieces of it, right? Little shiny places in your life where you found healing and where you've opened up your heart and aligned with yourself. We've talked about bankruptcy and losing everything. We've talked about the summer of loss. And people that are listening will identify with a part of your story. They'll likely hear themselves in what you've shared with us in today's episode. So imagining the listener who's in this cave, and they're either in it and they don't even know how to start walking out of it, or they're actively trying to change their life. If you can be that flashlight and shine that light into that dark cave and say, "Hey, it's going to be okay," what would be kind of your final message to the audience for people that feel like they might be in a place of destruction, a place of numbing themselves, a place of shame, a place of rage? What do you want to say?
I think what you just said, you're going to be okay. I know right now it doesn't feel like it. I know right now it feels heavy, it feels dark. And there's wisdom in the darkness, but give yourself a timeline to be there. Give yourself a timeline to be in the darkness, and then start to look for the gold in the darkness. This is probably going to be the title of my next book, which is something around find the gold in the darkness. That the gold is there. The gold is your heart. It's your goodness. It's your grace. And it's always there, even when you don't feel it. And find someone to talk to. Share with someone. We have created a society where we withdraw when we're in pain. And truly, if we look at some of our ancestors and other cultures where they have it way more together than we do, they come together in community when there's pain. And so find, we're online right now in the world. There's lots of online circles and communities and groups. And maybe you don't even turn your camera on, but you just listen. Listen to what other people are saying. Listening to this podcast is one step. And be kind with yourself. Be gentle with yourself. It's okay. And you will be okay.
For more information on Diana's work, visit dianalockett.com. Stories like this one are important to tell. It reminds us that even during the darkest times, we can always find light. We can always choose faith over fear. For exclusive content, please join my Spark Plug members-only community and apply to be a guest on this show. Find out more at spiritandspark.com.